I cannot think of a car that I have struggled to wrap my head around quite as much as this new Dodge Charger. And look, it's not that I don't understand it or that I don't think this gas version is good just the way it is, but this brand, it spent years pretending that an enormous asteroid wasn't bearing down on big displacement engines, and now here we are with an all-electric version of its retro-inspired muscle car, as well as one with a straight 6 under the hood. It's all a lot to unpack, so let's talk about it. For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that. There has been a lot of chatter about Dodge dusting off the Hemi and sticking it back in the Charger based on the backlash it's received, and it's kind of the same story with Ram in the 1500. I'm sure many of you out there remember that Ram discontinued the Hemi and it went with this same straight 6, and the blowback was immediate. Lots of people who don't know what they're talking about saying how terrible this engine is and that they would never buy a Ram again because it was V8 or die. So Ram capitulated and stuck the Hemi back in, and now there's rumor that the same thing is going to happen here. And look, I get it strictly from a passion perspective. I mean, the Hemi has a pretty loyal following. Lots of people love it. It does sound pretty good, but there's a lot of other factors to consider, and some of them have existed for over 50 years. Specifically, I'm talking about CAFE regulation, corporate average fuel economy standards. Those are important to remember because they're part of what killed off the Hemi, or at least put it in this weird position to begin with, because those are corporate average fuel economy standards. Keep that in mind. So it means it's the average of every vehicle that an automaker makes, every passenger vehicle that it sells. And the target right now is right around, 48 or 49 miles per gallon, or 4.8 liters per 100 kilometers, because we're pretty much in lockstep with those standards here in Canada. Now, I do know that in the States, the penalties for violating those standards, well, they were eliminated last year, but the standards themselves still exist. But it also means, if you're wondering why Ford was able to continue to sell V8 powered pickup trucks and Mustangs uninterrupted, well, that's a pretty good place to look. Because of course, small and efficient vehicles, as well as electric ones, those help to offset the consumption of big V8 engines. And an automaker like Stellantis really doesn't have much to offset what its V8 is consuming. So yeah, that's effectively what shelved the Hemi for as long as it did. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know for sure what the future is going to hold. Yes, there's lots of rumor that it's coming back. Is it going to fit under the hood of this thing? I'm not so sure, because if you look at this, the hood is already sitting so high with this straight 6. And when you pop the hood, yeah, there's that engine cover, but that's part of the problem. So I'm not so sure a V8 is going to fit so snugly under there, nor am I convinced that it is absolutely going to happen. Now, yes, I'm pretty sure it is, but you never know what the future is going to hold. So it puts this in a very odd position. Now, of course, that's a pretty good transition to talk about the cars that this one replaces. Of course, that would be the old Challenger and Charger that Dodge sold for about 15 years. And with great success, and both of them saw Dodge really lean into its heritage, as well as this V8 or die mantra. And it took on a sort of anti-establishment persona in the process. I don't know how natural it was, but it really leaned into this "we are different." Remember the brotherhood of muscle? Remember this very awkward tweet? All of that stuff became the defining characteristic, not just of this car or the Challenger, but of the brand itself. And now it's trying to sell a Charger Daytona that runs on nothing but electrons, or this Charger Sixpack that has a straight 6 under the hood. And to make matters, I don't know about worse, but at least different, Consider that every single one of them has all-wheel drive, which again is the antithesis of a car like this. I get it. I think it's cool. I think it means that it's got more traction and it can accelerate more quickly. But when you've spent all these years hyping up your macho, brute strength muscle car, and then you go with something like this, well, it's a tough sell. Now, listen, the reality is that this is a very good car just the way it is. Yes, with this twin turbocharged Hurricane straight six under the hood, it's just different, and that's going to be tough for a lot of people to come to terms with, especially the ones that have grown to love this car, or at least the one that came before it. But if you go with this gas-powered version, you are getting something that is quite capable. Now, just like before, there are a couple versions to choose from, but both of them in gas-powered guys use the same 3-liter straight six, just a standard output and a high output version. And this one I'm driving happens to be the high output. And let me tell you, the output is high. So if you go with the RT trim, you're getting 420 horsepower and 468 pound-feet of torque. But if you go with this Scat Pack version, the one I'm driving, you're getting 550 horsepower and 531 pound-feet of torque. That's more than you would get with that old 6.4 liter V8, the non-supercharged one, the one that would have come in the old Scat Pack, the 392. So just forget for a second the reckoning that Dodge is having with the consequences of its own actions. This is a very hardy performer, and it means that this Charger will do the sprint from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in right around 4 seconds, which is, I don't know, about a second and a half quicker than the RT version. Both of them are downright quick, and yes, that all-wheel drive system does help. Something to consider: you can disengage it if you want. You can dive into the infotainment system here, and if you put it in sport mode, you can go ahead and flip it over to rear-wheel drive. That'll disconnect the front axle so it behaves more like a conventional muscle car. Of course, there's line lock, there's launch control, there's all that good stuff. So this is a very modern muscle car. It's just different than anything Dodge has done before, just like the all-electric Charger Daytona. And I think that is what's going to be the most difficult for people to come to terms with. But there are some definite benefits with just how different this thing is, including how it performs on a winding road. Because yes, this is a very big car, and yes, it drives that way sometimes, but there are lots of times it absolutely does not. I don't think anyone would describe the old Challenger and Charger as small cars, but this new one that replaces both of them is absolutely enormous. It's about 5 or 6 inches longer than the old Charger sedan, and it's 1.5 inches wider than the wide body versions of both of those cars. Pretty crazy stuff. Even the track width, so the distance between the centers of the tires, is 3 inches wider this time around. Dodge even brags that this is the widest car that you can buy today. It's also very heavy. This Scat Pack version weighs 300 pounds more than the old Charger SRT Hellcat, the one with the enormous supercharged V8 shoehorned under the hood. And while we're on the subject of weight, the all-electric Charger Daytona weighs 1,000 pounds more than this one. I do really appreciate that Dodge is so steadfast in its commitment to retro-inspired styling, and this new Charger looks a lot like the second generation one that came out in 1968. Yes, you Dukes of Hazzard fans are surely going to appreciate that, and I appreciate this lift-back design because it makes this thing inherently more practical. And I know sensibility might not be top of mind when you're shopping for a car like this, but it's nice to know that there's not only a whole bunch of space inside, but that it's easier to use. But here is my big hang-up. Stellantis is so insistent on putting that trunk close button inside the cargo area instead of on the tailgate like every other automaker out there. I just don't get it, and no matter how many of these I drive, I still find myself reaching for the tailgate when I want to close it instead of putting my hand down and inside, and it's even more difficult in a small car like this, or at least a low one. Very frustrating stuff. Anyway, something else that we should talk about is the fact that whether you want the 2-door or the 4-door of this new Charger, the bodies are identical. The only difference, the number of doors. In the case of the 2-door version, just like the old Challenger, these things are huge. They make it very easy to slide in and out of this car, although you are going to struggle in parking lot situations, especially when you factor in just how wide this thing is overall. Now, I do have to say, outward visibility, not all that great and somewhat surprisingly so. I mean, yes, these windows are quite big, the windshield is huge, but so are these A-pillars that frame the windshield. They're very difficult to look around. And then with the slope of the rear end, that roof line, the way it comes down, you're looking through this rear window and it's a bit of a mail slot. So the views aren't all that spectacular, despite the fact that this is such a big car. But like I mentioned before, when you point it at a winding road, it does the proverbial shrinking act very well, and it manages to feel a lot more like a sports car. It handles very nicely, and it doesn't feel as out of sorts as the old car did when you were on a twisting road. It is very nice to drive. Coming up on these chicanes, I feel confident behind the wheel, and that's something that wasn't necessarily the case. Now, yes, if you just want to drive it in a straight line, I don't know, activate launch control and off you go, well, it'll do that. But if you do want to have a little bit of fun, maybe your buddies are out there with their Nissan Zeds and you want to, I don't know, play along, well, you can finally do it in a vehicle with a Dodge badge on the front end, and that is pretty cool. Now, as I'm sure as you would expect, just about everything in here has been overhauled. The Uconnect system is the latest. It's Uconnect 5, and it is very good. Now, the touchscreen is the same, I don't know, 12.3 inches or something like that. And then the digital instrument display, it's either 10.25 or 16 inches, depending on package. This one, of course, has the bigger one, and it's got all kinds of features. You can pull up a map view, you can pull up all kinds of gauges and instrumentation, shift lights, all of that stuff. This has performance pages, something that Dodge has had for a long time. Call that up in the infotainment system. That's also where you can find the different performance parameters. There's also wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It is a good system overall, and the feel in here is good. I like the look, I like the vibe. This one has a carbon and suede package. It's got this carbon finish, this excellent ambient lighting that looks really good in red, especially next to this accent stitching. I think this is a very nice cabin. I also like that everything is kind of canted towards the driver because this is a driver's car and it feels like one. It is very easy to interact with just about everything in here. Maybe the standouts are these door releases because they're buttons instead of conventional handles. I don't love that. And I also don't love this pistol grip style gear selector. It's just one of those sort of awkward ones because it's not really a pistol grip gear selector. It's just trying to be a modern version of one, and I find it sort of difficult and clunky. And I found myself this week accidentally putting it in neutral instead of reverse, and when you do that, on occasion, it will make you put it in park and then into the gear you want. So it's a little bit frustrating, but other than that, everything is fine. There's also a whole bunch of advanced driver assist systems, and they are all standard this time around. So you've got adaptive cruise control, blind spot monitoring, lane keep assist, forward collision warning, automatic emergency braking. Of course, there are some upgrades available. Some of them include rear parking sensors. Some of them include blind spot monitoring in the instrument display when you activate the signal, just like Hyundai and Kia offer. So it's a fairly robust package, but you are going to have to pay to play. This is an expensive car, and it gets even more expensive once you start to add options. So you've got the RT trim that starts at 62,000 bucks or so before tax, and then it's $3,000 more for the 4-door version, but there are tons of options and extras from there. And then this Scat Pack is 72 grand. It's the same 3,000 bucks if you want to get the 4-door, but this one I'm driving has about $14,000 in options, so it's nearly 87 grand before tax, and that is a lot of money. And don't forget, Dodge has left a lot of room for more trims on top of this one, including some that might be powered by a Hemi V8. To recap, I like the look of the new Dodge Charger, the uncharacteristic way it drives, and the liftback design. I don't like that it can sound a little dull, the compromised visibility that comes with the shape of it, or how enormous it is. On the surface, this Charger makes a lot of sense, and even if it isn't a smash hit, it's a pretty solid car just the way it is. The bigger issue is with the brand behind it, which spent years fostering resentment for a car exactly like this one, and now here it is trying to sell an electric version, as well as one with a straight six under the hood, and none of it makes much sense to me. And look, I don't take joy in any of this, and I hope any of you out there watching with a genuine interest in what this car has to offer will judge it on the merits of what it has and not what it doesn't, more specifically, a Hemi under the hood. If that's your sort of thing, you could always wait and hold out hope that one truly is on the way. Until then, well, this is as good as you're going to get, and I'm still not quite sure what the strategy is for Dodge or the Charger, both now and into the future, or what kind of brotherhood is going to rally around this car in the meantime.